Hey, Justin from Bikini Designs and welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Ford Ranger 3.2 Wild Track. Let's get straight into it. Why are you laughing? Beautiful.
Oh, what a machine!
Salisbury Plain meets Wales.
Yeah, exactly. So, the 3.2 Ford Ranger Wild Track. Now, what made me make the decision to get this truck? So I'm going to take you right back to the beginning so I can help you understand why I made the decision on this particular vehicle. Growing up in South Africa, I was surrounded by Toyota Hiluxes, Land Cruisers, and as you know, they have a formidable reputation, especially off-road and as a reliable vehicle. So back in 2017, looking for a brand new vehicle, I had a Toyota Hilux, I had a D-Max, and I had the Ford Ranger, all basically in my sights, having a look at all the pros and cons of each vehicle, the prices, and everything that each vehicle had to offer. So looking at those three trucks, you had the Toyota Hilux, you had the D-Max, and you had the 3.2 Wild Track. Now, as a package with everything included, such as interior, motor, all the different specs in mind, in my books, the Ford Ranger came up really good compared to the Toyota Hilux. In that particular year, I think the Toyota Hilux had some very not bad, but kind of worrying reviews with regards to handling, especially on-road handling. They had some issues there, and the keyless entry or the keyless start wasn't something I was very keen about, because as you can imagine, it's quite easy to code those keys and get scanners, and obviously you'll lose your pride and joy. The D-Max, however, is a very underrated truck, and it was something that I had my eyes set on for quite a long time. But it just didn't have the same sex appeal as the Ford Ranger 3.2 Wild Track. It had a really great interior, all leather, but in terms of the feel of the truck, it didn't really feel the same. The Ford Ranger 3.2 Wild Track felt more luxurious, obviously internally. The seating and the design, everything, there was a lot more thought process that went into the Ford Ranger at that particular time. And as you can imagine, in 2016/2017, Ford Ranger released the new facelift model, which is behind me, boasting obviously a 3.2 turbo diesel engine and a 6-speed gearbox. Now you can either have that in the manual or the automatic. I went for manual. I prefer the manual. It's only personal preference. And that's kind of what, as a package, what made me choose that particular vehicle. So having owned the vehicle for 4.5 years, I think the questions that you guys are really asking is, how has the vehicle been? What issues have I experienced over this period of time? What is the fuel economy? What is the motor like? What is the performance like? The payload? How has everything performed over this period of time? Am I getting good value for money? Now these are the things we're going to be looking at obviously throughout the video, and hopefully this information will help you and obviously determine your choice if you're looking at this vehicle or any other vehicle. But I can safely say for 4.5 years building this truck from the start, and if you go back to some of my earlier videos, you'll see the dramatic transformation this truck has undergone and undertaken from where it started to where it is today. And the reason why I've done a lot of the work myself, basically 99% of the work I have completed myself, is so I can understand the truck from a mechanical point of view. And if anything does go wrong in the future, I know exactly where to go, where to look, and how to diagnose and rectify those problems. Now, looking at the heart of the Ford Ranger is the 3.2 5-cylinder turbo diesel engine. Now, over the past 4.5 years that I've owned this vehicle, I've covered only 50,000 miles. We were in the middle of a 2-year pandemic, so traveling was, slightly hampered to a degree. However, it was still my daily driver and still is my daily driver. 70% of those miles is all blacktop or tar road, and the other 30% is all off-road and traveling. And over that period of time, I can safely say the motor is performed superbly well. So straight out of factory, the motor comes in at just under 200 brake horsepower and boasting 470 Newton meters of torque. So it's a nice motor, it's got a lot of grunt, and it's great for towing. Now, if you're new to the Ford Ranger scene, if you're looking at buying one of these vehicles, you might have heard the quotes going around, or the sayings going around, that there's a 10-minute oil change rule. Now, there's a partial truth to that, whereas the oil pump chosen to use in the motors across the range, the 2.2, the 3.2, and now the 2-litre bi-turbo, is the vane pump used for these motors. They don't tend to prime themselves very, very well with oil. So it is safe to say, if you drain the oil, you've got to do it in a very quick fashion to eliminate the vane pump running dry. Now, the reason why they chose a vane pump over the conventional style geared pump is a vane pump is more efficient and helps with throughout the torque, sort of the torque and the rev range of the motor. It delivers oil when it's needed. So in terms of efficiency and economy, it works really, really well over sort of a conventional geared pump, which delivers a constant volume of fluid or oil to the engine, and it's not as performance rated or efficient as the vane pump. Now, as you can imagine, a vane pump, it has little vanes that obviously spin around a cylinder. They tend to wear out and they can prematurely fail. Now, there has been reports of these failing, and when they do fail, unfortunately, the only thing that stands in its way is the rest of the motor, which is not very good. So if you're looking at the Ford Ranger, just keep in mind that you want to either upgrade the oil pump or get one that has that upgrade already been done to it. Now, I keep servicing at sort of 10,000 mile intervals, and that has worked superbly well for this motor. All the filters, the fuel filters, the air filters, I keep that changed exactly the same time. And then what has really, really helped this motor run superbly well is I got myself an oil catch can installed right at the beginning of the life of this truck, and that has really helped with keeping the manifold and the intake nice and clean, and it stops that premature sooting up and carbon buildup throughout your EGR valves. With most common rail diesel motors, that is with the recirculation of the exhaust gases, that tends to happen, and it does hamper the reliability and ultimately the performance of the vehicle. The great thing about obviously these motors, there's so many things you can do to them. I haven't done any particular performance mods with this vehicle. I've kept it as stock as I can. The only performance mod I have done to a degree is a throttle controller. Now that really livens up the motor. All it's doing is tricking the ECU in terms of what stage your throttle is at. So it obviously brings your turbo in a lot quicker. So in terms of performance, it feels a lot nippier, and you do get up to speed a lot quicker. So it does help with performance and sort of your fuel economy over a period of time. So the next thing we're going to look at is that little blue cap there, which is the AdBlue tank. Now, for those of you who own a Ford Ranger, or you're looking to obviously get one Ford Ranger, AdBlue is something new that was added to the vehicles in 2016, or the facelift models, due to new emission laws, and I'm all for it, and I totally understand it and I get it. I don't think that the factories, the dealers, or even the owners were prepared for what they were about to face. During that period of time, I would say probably about 18 months, is they were hampered with issues with the AdBlue system. Owners were faced with a warning message on their dashboard saying that you need to fill up your tank, and if you don't, the engine will not start. And even after filling the tank up, they were still faced with that same warning message, and as you can imagine, the engine didn't start. Now you're faced with getting the vehicle back to the dealer for repair and diagnosis. Now, in most cases, what I've seen across the board is that not even the dealers understood what was going on with these AdBlue systems. Now, I experienced a very intermittent problem, exactly the same, about a year ago, and I jumped straight into the problem. The first thing I was trying to diagnose if there was any sort of crystallization within the AdBlue system, especially with the float switch, because they're quite prone for it. So I dropped the tank out, had a look around. There was no crystallization of any sort of means, which was quite frustrating. So I didn't really understand what was causing the problem. And the only sort of thoughts I had, it's got to be a software issue. And that same evening I upgraded the infotainment system in the vehicle to Sync 3.0, and funny enough, the very next day on driving to work, the system cleared itself, which is I'm truly grateful for. But that's the only sort of conclusion I can come up with, that it was a software problem, and Ford must have released some form of sort of software update, and which is obviously stopped that glitch from happening again. So just keep that in mind if you do get a Ford Ranger, and if you do experience those problems, it tends to be, what I can see is either a software problem, but keep your AdBlue system topped up as much as you can, hopefully eliminate that problem from your vehicle. So there's nothing like enjoying a nice lifted truck and getting the height out of your truck and making it a little bit more beefy. What I have noticed from basically a lot of new trucks, even from factory, who are relatively new, they are experiencing front spring failures, whereas the springs are snapping and cracking, which is not very good, even with trucks that are not even modified. Which is slightly worrying. So the component choice in that sort of matter hasn't been very good in terms of reliability, and so which I was quite fortunate enough right at the beginning of the truck's life that I upgraded the suspension to the Track Rider, the foam cells from Pedders, and that changed the performance and the handling of the truck dramatically, and I was very impressed with that. And I've been fortunate enough to carry on working with Pedders and testing their Track Rider Extremes, their remote reservoir, fully adjustable suspension, and they are absolutely superb. And it was definitely worth, and it is definitely worth investing in decent suspension for your vehicle, especially if something as robust as this kit. It's fully adjustable. You can adjust the height, the rebound, the compression. So it's really, really nice to have that at your fingertips to really sort of dial in the ride, and obviously for the different types of terrains that you might be experiencing. Obviously with the Ford Ranger you've got over a ton payload capacity, which is really great, but what I have noticed with these trucks is that the leaf springs, especially the factory leaf springs, they are definitely not suited for the life of the truck. What I've noticed is that the leaf springs is obviously leveling out, and even obviously going beyond what they were supposed to be doing. So upgrading the leaf springs was high on my priority list, and I got that changed, and it's definitely worth it. But more importantly is invest the time and the money on some decent components, especially for your suspension, because you definitely won't regret it. So the interior of the vehicle, let's have a quick look at that. And more importantly, the Wildtrak model boasts a really luxurious feel interior compared to competing manufacturers out there. I think personally that the Wildtrak has a far superior interior in terms of design and the materials used in the interior. The seats boast a sort of half leather, half synthetic construction, and it's super sporty, and I love the color arrangement they've used. It looks really, really nice, and it does feel great as well. The only things I would say to look out for is, especially with the Wildtrak models and other models, the sort of the cloth interior models, is especially with the driver's seat. Most vehicles, suffer this anyway. Depending on how you get in and out of the vehicle, this sort of area here, the edge of the seat tends to wear out. You tend to either break the stitching or crack the leather. What I've done right from the beginning of the life of the vehicle is I got some decent Meguiar's leather treatment, and I treat the interior every couple of weeks, make sure everything's nice and supple, nice and clean, and well looked after, and that has proven to be very, very good for the life of the interior. Ultimately, I've used car seats to protect it even further, because I do obviously a lot of off-roading, a lot of filming, so I'm in and out of the seat all the time, and it just gives me a peace of mind that I know once I take all that interior protection out of there, it's going to look, as good as new. The other thing to look out for, especially on the driver's seat, is this plastic sort of shroud that houses obviously your buttons to adjust your seat. That tends to crack. And I think that can only be down to either the individual getting in the vehicle in a certain way. I haven't experienced that, luckily, so just be careful of that. So when you get in the vehicle, try not to drag your ass over the side of the seat. I think you will eliminate a lot of problems by destroying obviously the threading, and then ultimately cracking your plastic. But overall, very, very impressed with the interior of the vehicle. And other thing I have done as well, I've put on a steering wheel protector That's given the steering wheel a nice sort of feel. And what I've noticed with the Wild Tracks, with the leather steering wheels, they tend to crack, especially at the top of the steering wheel where they're exposed to a lot of sun. The leather goes really dry and it sort of wearing out, and then obviously you lose the leather and it starts breaking, which is not really good. So that's really helped. I just keep that nice and clean as much as I can. But overall, very, very impressed with the interior, especially with the Apple CarPlay. It's super handy and it works with my sort of mapping systems and all those kind of things, which is really, really great. So another important thing that I'd like to mention with the Ford Ranger, especially with the 3.2, is the fuel economy. So you're probably thinking, obviously with all the gear that I'm attaching or got attached to the vehicle and the weight I'm carrying, you're really interested to know what sort of fuel economy I'm returning. So currently in its current form, I'm returning 21 miles per gallon on an average day, which is pretty decent, depending obviously if I'm traveling on a motorway to get to a destination, that slightly increases, but when I'm out on the tracks and using the four-wheel drive system, that obviously decreases because I'm using a lot more fuel. A huge factor on that is the amount of accessories that I have on the vehicle. So if you choose a vehicle, just be mindful of what you're going to be adding to the vehicle. Try and keep the weight to a minimum. There are a lot of guys out there who are towing with their vehicles and they're returning some really good mileage, almost up in the 30s or the high 20s, which is really decent for the 3.2s. Even the 2-litre bi-turbos, they're returning some really good fuel economy numbers there. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, especially with the fuel prices going through the roof. So hopefully that helps you. Righty, so focusing on the rear of the vehicle. So now, particularly with the Ford Ranger and most pickup trucks out there, there is a plethora of different mods you can do to the back of your vehicle, from canopies to load bay covers to roller shutters. There are so many different awesome products out there. I particularly went for a canopy. I've got dogs. Obviously I do a lot of traveling, so that suited my needs particularly. So if you are going to get yourself a canopy, one word of advice is get yourself a canopy that you can open not only from the back but also from the sides. There's nothing worse than trying to access gear, the rear of your canopy, and you have to clamber your ass into the back of the canopy. So numbnuts here obviously made that mistake. So this canopy will be getting out of here very, very soon. Another good thing to have on your pickup is a tailgate damper. It slows it down. It's much more controlled. If you do have small children, at least you know that that won't come crashing down on them, because these tend to be quite heavy in some cases. These tend to be really nice. I've made a sort of a workspace here where I can prepare food and just do little bits and pieces on here. And obviously with my particular canopy system, I've got a drawer system in there, which is really handy, and it suits my particular needs in terms of traveling and filming and doing all that kind of thing. But there, like I said before, there's so many different things you can do. In terms of the Ford Ranger, it has really nice load bay rails with adjustable tie-down points, which is really handy, which are either side of the load bay. And the other cool thing about the Ranger is that it comes with a 12-volt cigarette lighter socket, which is in the back of the truck. Again, it's very, very handy. So if you've got any tools or any sort of accessory that runs off 12-volt power, you can access it right from the back here instead of going right into the front of the truck, which again is really good, really nice and handy. But like I previously mentioned, there's so many different ways you can change the back of your truck to suit your particular needs. And the Ford Ranger has got really nice sort of features in terms of the tie-down points, and the amount of accessories available for the truck is really, really good. Now the old saying goes, they don't make them like they used to. Now it brings me on to the next topic, which is rust, which is very annoying for any truck owner, especially if you've got a truck that's probably about a year old, and you start seeing rust or either on the chassis or any other components underneath the vehicle, which is it can be very, very frustrating. And what I found with the Ford Rangers and a lot of the other manufacturers across the board is that manufacturers are starting to use a lot cheaper materials. They're cheaping out, and ultimately the consumer is having to deal with the problems. That has kind of done a full circle, and the dealers are starting to cop for those costs as well, and that means basically taking the vehicle back to the dealer. They remove the body off the chassis, reapply the rust proofing, and then reinstall the body to the chassis. Now you have to understand that you have to try and trust that dealer 100% to make sure that your vehicle is back to exactly how it was. And that is a huge undertaking from the dealership, and obviously from the consumer, ultimately from the consumer at the end of the day. So what I highly recommend is, if when you get your Ford Ranger or whatever vehicle you may choose, is have a look close eye on the chassis and then apply some form of rust protection. So right in the beginning I kept an eye on it and applied a waxy material all across the components, and that has really combated and has done a really good job of keeping rust at bay. I actually have a video coming out shortly which is going to go into depth in how that has prevented rust across the chassis, and I've actually coated one side of the vehicle with it and removed it from the other side, so we can ultimately see a difference there. But that's definitely something to look out for. In my case, it hasn't been really bad. It's more sort of surface rust, but it's still something that's very annoying to deal with, and you have to, if you're spending upwards of £30,000 on a brand new truck, the last thing you want to worry about is trying to rust proof your vehicle. It should have already been done. You've paid that money, you want to enjoy your vehicle for what it is, and not having to worry about rust and having to go in there and paint things and sort things out. So that's one thing I would definitely highly recommend you guys, is having a look at if there's any rust issues and combating them straight away. So would I recommend this vehicle? Absolutely. It is very comfortable to drive, it looks good, it performs very well, it tows great, it has a lot going for it, and it's really there's so many different mods in the market that it's just endless what you can do to these vehicles, especially the Ford Ranger being so popular, and there are so many out there that you can pick up that are already pre-done, and you just got to kind of tweak it to your kind of liking. So highly recommend this vehicle. The only thing I would say, if you're going to get a new one, is just be careful what dealer or dealership you're dealing with. Have a look and research obviously them individually. There's been instances where dealerships are horrendous to deal with. Luckily my local one is been a breath of fresh air, very helpful, and has been an absolute pleasure to deal with, which is really nice. Ford don't have a really good reputation in terms of customer service, so I'll just put that out there, so just be careful of that. But overall the vehicle is really nice. I think in terms of you comparing it to the other Rangers of other manufacturers, I think this does come out on top in terms of what you get for what you pay for. Hopefully this video has helped you and has been insightful and informative. If you have any further questions that you'd like to ask about the vehicle in any particular way, or any questions that you'd like answering, please let me know. You can either send me an email, contact me through Instagram, or even down the comments down below. Any other sort of suggestions you might have for the future, which would be great. But I really appreciate your support all the way through the video, and we will definitely see you in the next one.